All right. Well, welcome in. Thank you guys very much for inviting me. I told the group here that I actually was a meetup group uh, co-sponsor, co-facilitator for several years here in my area in Dallas in the US. And so I'm very familiar with the process and all the volunteer hours that have to be put in to do something like this. So just a big thank you to the group who does this, because I know it's a lot of behind the scenes work to make something like this happen. But I will also say that, as far as my Agile journey was concerned, coming to a meetup like this was just essential. It was really, a foundational part of my learning and growing and, reaching the level that I'm at today. Just a lot of mentoring, a lot of conversations with other Agilists, and really, really helped me. So again, thank you for the opportunity. Before I dive too far in, sorry. Okay. Before I get too far into things, just really quickly, I want to say that I am not going to share a screen in Zoom the way that you may be used to. A lot of times presenters will do that and it kind of hijacks your whole screen. We use, at Mountain Goat, we use a presentation software, and what that means is that the slides are going to look like this. So if that's tiny for you, a couple of recommendations here that might help. One is check in the top right corner of your screen where it says View. You probably want to click on that and change it from Gallery to Speaker. So if you go to Speaker View, that should make my screen bigger for you. The other thing you might want to do is hover over my screen and click on the ellipse, the three dots, and find the word PIN, P-I-N. If you click on that, then it'll keep my picture front and center for you. If somebody coughs or their dog barks, they won't steal that center position, and you'll be able to keep seeing the slides. But I was asked here to talk to you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It is something that Mike Cohn and I have worked on really for the past few years, but we started to turn this over and started to take in public participation in this over about the past year or so. And that's something that we call the Elements of Agile. Let me introduce myself. My name is Brian Milner. I am the Senior Vice President of Agile Training and Coaching for Mountain Goat Software. I work with Mike Cohn. We design courses together and try to decide what's most needed in the Agile space and try to deliver that. I've been in software development for over 25 years now. I started as a developer, so I have a tech background. I started programming databases and moved from there to websites. I've been a manager of teams. I've been a Scrum Master. I've been a product owner and an Agile coach. Now I mostly train, but I also do some coaching with organizations to try to help them really get the most out of Agile in their organizations. I'm also the host of our podcast. If no one has listened to that, I'll just make a quick plug for that. The Agile Mentors podcast is the name of it. If you've heard any of that, you've heard my voice. I'm the one who hosts that. I have a different guest on every week, and we base it around a topic. So we intentionally designed it to be something that you could look at the list, and if there was a topic that interests you, you could just listen to that topic. Right? You don't have to listen to every episode unless you really like the content, and if so, great, tune into every episode. But if you're just looking for certain information, we wanted to make that available to people. So that's how we do our podcast. I am a CST with the Scrum Alliance. I teach certified Scrum Master, certified product owner classes. I also, for Mountain Goat, I designed and teach our advanced classes. I teach our advanced Scrum Master, advanced product owner classes. So that's a little bit about me. Just wanted to kind of introduce myself so you knew who this guy was you were looking at here for the next hour. Want to talk a little bit and get into this. I want to talk about the methodology here and what we came up with, where this came from, why we started this in the first place. As we were working with organizations, as Mike and I were working with organizations, we were discussing the trends we were seeing, and we were seeing how organizations tended to have similar issues. Most organizations that come to us for coaching tend to have sort of similar issues, and we wanted to try to find a way to identify those and make it easier for organizations to identify them so that they could then find the right course of action to take moving forward from that. So that's kind of where the idea of this came. What it ends up looking like is something like this. It's like a periodic table of elements. We kind of thought about this as being there's about 20 different elemental items that organizations need to be doing well in order to be really succeeding with Agile. A lot of this comes from one of Mike's books called Succeeding with Agile, and we based a lot of our stuff off of that. That book's been out for many years now, but we're putting this in a new way to help people kind of find their place in this. It is divided into 3 layers. There's a functional, an improving, and a succeeding layer. We're going to take a closer look at this again in a minute, but just kind of point that out here before we go in. When we do these with organizations, we kind of have 2 approaches here. One is we have a more succinct survey that is about 20 questions. That 20 question survey, it is free. It's open for anyone to take. I'll actually make sure that you have the address where you can go and take the survey at the end of this session. That's free and open to anybody. It's a single response survey, so you go through it, you fill it out for what you believe to be the situation in your organization, and what we generate for everyone is a PDF that is really expansive. It's about 30 pages or so, but it talks about each element, and it highlights the ones that maybe you were struggling a little more with. And for those, we give you some recommendations. We tell you, for these elements, if you're experiencing this problem, here's some things you can do to get better. We also do another version of this, which is a more expansive version. It is a 60 question survey. And that survey we do with private clients that come to us and want to really focus and get some answers on what's going on with their organization. We do more than the survey for that group, though. What we found is that when people take the survey, and by the way, the survey, when we send it to private clients, multiple people in the organization take it, and we consolidate all that information into one report. But what we found is that when we do that, some of the information that we get is skewed by bias, right? People who report on this want their position to look better. So if they find a question that they feel maybe reflects on the job they've been doing, then they might tend to answer that more positively than maybe someone who isn't as connected to that particular issue. So what we end up doing is we have added in our private engagements an interview component. So the organization takes the survey, but then we also conduct a handful of one-on-one interviews where I'll sit down with them or another coach will sit with them, and really, based on what we heard in the survey, try to poke at it a little bit and see if we're hearing anything different. Usually I can tell when there's a mismatch, when I see maybe developers saying one thing and the leader is saying a different thing. That gives me a clue that this is an area I might want to ask some questions about. So I try to interview all those people to really surface the truth of what's really going on that I can't see in the survey. And what we do with that then for our clients is we combine that into a overall scorecard. And the scorecard is combining the results of the survey plus the expert analysis of talking one-on-one with that group of people to say, here's what we feel is the reality of what's going on in the organization. Now, when I do this, I don't usually flip very many items, but there have been occasions where I have found problems that were underreported in the survey, and I have changed the score on those particular items in that case. So just to kind of give you the background of what this looks like and how we use this in our practice, what we do with it in our practice. I want to talk to you about the elements, though. I want to get into really the guts of this, because that's just kind of the setup, the premise of this. The main component of this, as I mentioned to you before, is sort of a periodic table of elements chart. And this is that periodic table of elements. 20 different elements that are spread out across those 3 layers. We also have grouped them into 6 main functions, I think, that would go along with this. And the layers here, the foundational, improving, and succeeding, it's not a sequential path. We very rarely see it as a sequential path. We do think of foundational as being more basic things that teams need to get under their belt. Improving is more, something that a team that has been doing this for a while might have an issue with. And succeeding is really, we're trying to make it to a really high performing stage. So there are kind of levels of expertise here, but an organization's path through them is not necessarily from foundational to improving to succeeding. As we do the surveys, we often see organizations that might have a problem in one of the other areas and not one of the ones below it, or vice versa. So it's not necessarily you got to get all the foundational things right before you can start to do any of the improving. It just doesn't work like that. The other thing that was kind of interesting that we've learned over the course of doing this through multiple groups is that there's like I said, an underreporting that goes on. There's a bias that comes through when people take the survey. You might see something, for example, one of the elements we're going to talk about more in a minute is the one in the bottom left corner called awareness. Well, awareness is really about knowledge of the process, knowledge of terms, knowledge of what the concepts are. And if I see an organization that is rated lower, then I know that there are going to be things that they're going to rate high only because they don't know enough about them yet, right? If you don't know what it means to have, for example, a self-organizing team, right? If that term really hasn't, sunk in to the organization, then it's very possible that the organization could rate it very highly. We don't know what it is, but it sounds good, and we probably do it. So let's just say that that's good. That's kind of the response that you get sometimes. But you can get those clues from the bottom layer, right? You can say, oh, I see why they rated this well, because they didn't really have the knowledge to know whether they were doing it well or not, right? For this talk, we actually hadn't done this before this talk, and this gave us an opportunity to kind of look at the data that we had. And one of the things I wanted to see was, out of all the people that have taken our survey, and we've had, hundreds of people that are individuals that have taken our survey. We've had several, a handful of companies that we have done those more intensive one-on-one kind of approaches with. I wanted to look at the combined data and see if there were trends, see if there was something that we could call out across all the groups. And we did find that. We did find, just like I said, before we even began this project, we knew that there were some trends, there were some common things that were problems with people. And what we found was there was about 6 of these elements that, more than any other, were elements that organizations were having issues with. And these were those 6. You can see that these are spread out across 3 different big groupings here. There's transition management. So there's all 3 of them in that, all elements in that area were kind of suspect. There were 2 of them in the teamwork area, how a team actually works together. And then, a big one, getting to done every iteration, getting to done. So I thought what would be good for us is to walk through those most common ones rather than walking through all 20, because you may only have one of these that would be a problem, and it's more likely that the ones that are a problem for you are going to be one of these more common ones. So we're going to walk through those 6 main problem area ones and talk through them and kind of look at them in detail. Hopefully one of those might be something that you're having an issue with. If not, as I said, you're welcome to take our survey on your own. I'll give you that address at the end, and we'll have some specific advice for you for whatever your trouble area is. But I'm thinking this has a higher likelihood of actually hitting the majority of people here. So I want to talk through that first big block, the transition management. There are 3 elements in there that really produce problems that we see over and over again. The first one I've already mentioned to you, awareness. And what we mean by awareness in this is Agile team members have received basic training on Agile concepts. Now that basic training doesn't mean that they've paid for someone to come in, but that there's someone who has spread the truth of what it means to be Agile in some way, right? People in key roles, people that have been moved into new key roles like Scrum Masters or product owners, or even in some cases Agile coaches, that they have received appropriate training for what they're being asked to do. I've seen quite often someone who has moved from project manager or even from a developer into a Scrum Master role, and they're given that title, they're given kind of that role, but they don't really have any background in it, and it seems more like the organization is just trying to check a name off a list. Do we have a Scrum Master for this team? Yep, got a Scrum Master, right? So there needs to be the appropriate level of training for whatever that role is that they're going to serve on a team. And then lastly, what we mean is change agents are in place to help support and guide this transition. Do you have people in the organization that can help move the transformation forward, right? Or is this just a one-off thing? Or every team's on their own. There's no one sort of looking out for the big picture. Symptoms, what you might actually notice, these are things you might see in your organization. So if you say yes to any of these, right? If I call any of these things out and you go, yep, that's happening in my organization, then this element might be an element that you're having a problem with. Disagreements arise over the meaning of various process-related terms. Do you have disagreements on what story points mean? Do you have disagreements on what a user story is, or whether user stories are required or not? Do you have disagreements on what it means to be a product owner? What's the rights and responsibilities of a product owner if you're doing Scrum? These are the kind of things that you would see, right? You'd see that kind of dissonance between different parts of the organization on just the basic meaning of terms. People don't know how to perform their role on the team, or they don't know what's expected of them. So this gets back to the situation I said before. If someone has moved into a Scrum Master role and they have no experience there, but they're sort of just abandoned into that role. The organization says, yep, go forward and do this. But really, we just want you to do what we told you to do before. So if you're a developer, be a developer, but you're a Scrum Master too, whatever that means. If someone gets put in that spot and they just feel like, gosh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. They told me I'm a Scrum Master, but I don't know what that means. Then that's kind of a symptom, right? That's something you would look out for. Another thing is people who are in new or modified roles, again, such as Scrum Master, Product Owner, or Agile Coach, are either tentative about what they're being asked to do, or they just fall back into habits that are really detrimental to agility. Again, this can happen if they're not trained, right? This can happen if they don't have the basic knowledge, or this can happen if they're resistant, right? If someone is moved into a role that really shouldn't be in that role, doesn't want to be in that role, then they might fight back and push back against it. And if they push back, then they could actually try to promote ideas, practices, philosophies that really run counter to what we're trying to accomplish with agility. So recommendations, what would we tell people to do here to try to improve on these? When we get to our recommendations sections for these, my hope is that you will, if this is a problem, see these as potential improvement backlog items. Just like you come out of a sprint review with 1 to 3 items you can do to improve and get better, I would hope you would consider these for those kind of things, right? For your organization, these are maybe things you could do to improve in this area if it's an issue. 1, no brainer, arrange for training, right? Arrange for some kind of training. Again, doesn't have to mean you pay someone from outside to come in and do that, although that can be highly effective. Obviously, we believe in that because that's what Mountain Goat does, right? We train people all the time. But we also know that organizations have internal people that do this. And one of the things we give people at the end of every class is, we have a presentation that they can download and use to train people. We also have, for free on our website, a course that's called Scrum Foundations. And anyone can sign up for that. All you need is an email address. If you do that, then you get access to videos from Mike walking through just the very basics of Scrum. So that can be what someone does, right? But people need to be able to understand and level set on what these terms mean. Use consistent terminology. When one team says that that's a product owner, or when one team says that's our backlog, is that the same terminology that other teams are using? Does it mean something different? If someone moves from one team to another team, are they going to be lost because people use terms in very different ways? Well, that's something we want to try to address, right? Sometimes people will even come up with a sort of vocabulary, a dictionary for terms for the organization to just say, when we say this word, here's what it means here. And then everyone can be on the same page about what it is we're trying to accomplish with that. Lastly, establish guidelines for what can be called Agile. This can be a big thing because a lot of times, if there's sort of not that overarching guide for the organization that has an eye on the big picture, then what can happen is that you have very different versions of what people are calling Agile. And you've heard all the terms like WAGILE in the past, waterfall, Agile mix. And if that's the case, right, if you have different teams that are practicing in very inconsistent ways, then it's important to sort of make set that bar and say, here's what Agile is. These teams are actually Agile because they're doing these things. These teams over here, they may be trying to put in place some Agile principles, but they're not really committed to being Agile, right? They're just trying to put a few of these things in place. So try to establish that to say, these are our Agile teams, these are not Agile teams, so that there can be a clear kind of consistent theme there with the organization. I want to move into talking about advocacy. Advocacy is the second one here. It's the next level up on that scale. And this is a problem that we see a lot of teams have. What we mean by this is leaders don't really communicate what the organization hopes to achieve by becoming Agile. There's no why behind it, right? People are being asked to do something, but they don't understand why. Change agents are in place and help support and guide the transition, similar to what we said last time, right? But this is just in an advocacy sense that people feel that they're supported in what they're doing. And those change agents are supporting the teams. An educated executive sponsor ensures the change agent is empowered to make decisions. When we have those people put in place, we don't want them to have to get approval for every small change that would help this transformation take root. We need them to be able to be empowered by leadership. Leadership needs to look at them and say, yep, these are our champions. These people know what they're talking about. We want them to go forward and institute this change. And then lastly here, the team and its decision makers understand the benefits, challenges, and risk of transitioning to Agile. So they don't go into it blindly, right? They're not, it's not gosh, I'm not sure what the term would be for you. We would say sort of a naive kind of approach, right? Going into something to say, yeah, this is going to be great. We're not going to have any problems. We're just going to start this and then it's going to be great within 2 weeks. That's not going to happen, right? There's going to be challenges and hurdles to overcome to make this change successful. So when people are recognizing, no, we're going into this with open eyes. We know that there's going to be issues and we're ready to tackle them. That's what we mean by advocacy. So symptoms, what might you see if this was a problem? Well, after successfully introducing basic aspects of agility, teams are thwarted when they attempt to broaden or deepen their use of Agile. This is sort of the ceiling that some teams hit, right? They're very keen on this. They're very adept at conquering change, at experimenting and finding new ways of doing things, and they get very excited about it. But they bump up against some kind of a ceiling where the organization kind of stops them and just says, hey, you can come this far, but don't go further than this, because we don't want to change what we do. You can change what you do all you want, but don't change how you interact with people outside your team. That would be a symptom of this. Agile efforts among different teams are very haphazard, right? Scattered, right? Without the coordinated approach to experimenting that would find the best way to be agile. So there's no overarching process here. There's no design to the change. It's basically every team's on their own, and they're sort of just trying to figure it all out by themselves. So there's no guidance for them to get better when they encounter problems that maybe 5 other teams have encountered, right? We want to be able to share that knowledge across the organization. Team members are becoming discouraged by the slow rate of change. They're frustrated because they've started to see progress, but now that they've seen progress, they can't really keep it going, right? They're frustrated that it has to take so long to make these kinds of changes in the organization. And then lastly, when teams encounter issues they cannot solve on their own, they have no clear escalation path. This will be a theme I return to here in the course of this, because it does affect several different other things. But we need teams to know that they should identify problems. And if they identify a problem that is something that they don't have the resources or authority to deal with, that they know where it should go, right? They shouldn't just raise it and say, I don't know what to do with this, but we can't solve it. They should have a clear path of, I know what happens when we have something like that. I know where it goes, right? So our recommendations, if this is a problem, identify that guiding coalition, right? Who is that group of Agile champions? We'll talk about this more as well. Just, we want a sort of a cross-functional team. We want people who represent different parts of the company who form this transformation team that are empowered and in charge. It's not one person, right? It's not a good idea to have one person who this transformation all rests on, but instead have a cross-functional team, just like we do with everything else, that represents different parts of the company. And that team can start to make decisions and resolve some of these impediments. Form targeted improvement communities. One of the goals of that guiding coalition is to encourage, foster some improvement communities to pop up. These would be communities of practice, might be a word for this that you might be familiar with. They're people who are very energetic around certain practices or certain ways of improving, and they come together with the purpose of trying to make that change in the organization. So encourage that, foster it. The guiding coalition cannot do it all, right? The leadership can't do it all. You have to have this groundswell. You have to have it come from bottom up as well. And then lastly, create a transition and improvement backlog. Like I said, we got to have somewhere that these problems we can't resolve go. And the solution to that is to have a backlog for that guiding coalition. Right? When you have that layer team that is responsible for the transformation, they should have a backlog like anybody else. And when my team finds something that we can't resolve, it should go into that team's backlog, right? It goes there, and then that team has to decide what to do with it. There's got to be some decision about, are we going to live with that? Are we okay that that's the situation? Or do we not really like that and we want to do something about it, right? So that backlog then can be a very visible, transparent artifact for the organization. Let's talk about leading by example, the last one, the top one in this section. We mean by this practices are being implemented beyond the group which started this. It's spreading, right? It's not just in one part of the company. Leaders work in accordance with Agile values and principles. This is a huge one. Leaders are not considering this a team thing, right? This is not something for the teams to do, and I'm going to continue to be the same leader I've always been. That's not going to work, right? Leaders have to change their approach. This is why there are leadership classes, right? This is why the Scrum Alliance has certified agile leadership classes. And this is why, at Mountain Goat, we do have, half day, 1 day, sessions that we do with leaders regularly where we try to prepare them. We try to say, here's what you need to know. Here's what your teams are going to be saying to you. And here's how you respond. Here's how you empower them and help them to get better. Also, leaders support and champion agile principles. So they're not just talking about it, but they're doing it, right? They want you to follow their example, not just what they're saying. That's what we mean by leading by example. Symptoms of this: leaders say they support agile, but they work in ways that are contrary to it. Great example. If I say, yes, we're all on board, I'm the CEO of this company and we're all on board with agile and the agile philosophy, yes, go forward with that and propagate it. Make sure everyone believes in that. But then you get emails from me every night at, late in the night, or you get emails from me on the weekend. And I'm asking you to do things, right? It's not just, hey, this is just for information. You don't need to do anything with this, but it's, hey, I need that information on whatever, right? If I'm the CEO or if I'm a leader and I'm sending out emails, what I'm showing is, yes, I say that I believe in a sustainable pace, but I don't practice it myself, right? And if I'm an employee of that person, what I say is, okay, the boss is telling me work at a sustainable pace, but the boss is showing me that she doesn't think that that's actually correct, right? She is actually telling me that to be successful, you got to work longer hours. And if that's the case, what are the employees going to do? They're going to follow the example, right? So leaders need to make sure that they back up what they're saying. Pockets of agile exist, but agile rarely spreads to other teams or groups. Right? That's a symptom. We want it to spread. We don't want it to be confined to one discipline or one skill set within the organization. It should spread to other groups. It should spread to finance or HR or marketing, right? It should go beyond just, for instance, software development. And if that's happening, then that's a good sign. Leaders tell teams they want them to be agile, but then continue to make demands for teams that prevent them from becoming more agile. So it's not just I'm sending emails at night, but I'm imposing restrictions on you that prevent you from actually becoming agile yourself, right? That's kind of what we're trying to drive at there. That's a symptom. That's a clear symptom that we have a problem with this particular element. So our recommendations, check alignment. Check alignment between what leaders are saying and doing. And if I'm a leader in the organization, I'm going to provide some method of feedback so that I can get that unbiased feedback from my employees. If I say we're going to be agile, I want to know if you don't see me being that, right? If I am not embodying that for you, tell me. And I'm going to set up some really safe way that doesn't make you feel in jeopardy of losing your job by telling me, giving you a chance to tell me that I'm not doing that. Incorporate stories of walking the talk. Make sure that that's evangelized throughout the organization. Help others to see, hey, here's an example of what it looks like to do this, right? Here's an example of what it means when we say simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. Here's what that looks like. If we can do that, then it moves from the realm of theoretical to practical. It moves into the area of, now I see what you mean by that. Well, how would that affect what we do? And that's the kind of conversation you want the teams to have. Conduct a retrospective focused on agile values and principles. This can be an organization-wide thing, and I think it's something that should happen periodically. Stop, pause down, and say, as an organization, how are we doing? This can be done through a survey. This can be done through small pockets of retrospectives that take place. and then sharing that with a bigger group. But it's very valuable to just have the organization in one voice express, here's how we're doing. These things are a problem. These things we're doing really well with. And if you get that, then you know where to focus. You know where the attention needs to be spread. Okay. All right. So let's move out of that transformation area. Let's talk about teamwork. Teamwork's another big area of problem that we see quite often with organizations. How teams actually work. We can follow the practices, but if we don't know how we're actually going to engage with each other while we follow those practices, then we may be getting this all wrong. One of those elements is team accountability. What we mean by this is team members are willing to work outside of their specialties, right? So the team goal comes first. When a team member is behind, other team members help out. If there's a problem and it may not be my skill, I'm willing to lend a hand. I may not be as adept at it as someone who is an expert in that area, but there's probably something I could do to help, right? I'm not completely helpless. I do have some skill. So even if that's not my primary skill, I should be able to help. So symptoms you would see with this, team members view their commitment as being personal set of tasks. I got my list of things to do in this sprint or this iteration. I'm going to do those things, right? Whatever your list is, that's up to you, but I've got my list of things to do. Team members hew closely to what they know, meaning that they don't really feel they can, or they're unwilling to venture out into other skills. They feel like, for example, I'm a Java developer. I got hired as a Java developer and I could never do testing, or I could never do any UI, or I could never do any database work. Well, that's not true, right? You can do that. And no one's asking you to be an expert UI person or an expert tester, but we are asking you to lend a hand. If there's nothing but testing work left to do, people should be working together to try to accomplish that. Tasks often remain undone at the end of an iteration, or, put another way, the team isn't meeting the iteration goal. If that's the case, that's a symptom, right? That's a thing you can point to say, maybe this is going on. So our recommendations in resolving this: one, help team members see the part personal responsibility actually plays in team accountability. Team accountability is important, and we want to make sure people understand that, but we want to also educate that personal responsibility is part of that. It's not all personal responsibility, right? If I'm playing in a team sport, I have my responsibility to that team. There's something that the team is asking of me to do that it's not asking of someone else to do. However, my goal is to win the game, whatever the game is. My goal isn't just to play my part perfectly. So I want to do whatever I can do to help my team win. And that's what we need them to understand. You have personal accountability here, personal responsibility, but that's only a component of the larger thing, which is a team accountability. Stress team commitment during planning sessions. We want people to go through something like sprint planning and leave with a unified team commitment. So this is one reason that I'm very hesitant, or I'm very cautious when teams dole out or parse out all the tasks in sprint planning and say, these are these person's tasks, these are these person's tasks, right? 5 tasks for you, 5 tasks for you, 5 tasks for this person. I don't like that to happen usually in a sprint planning session, because what it fosters is a personal responsibility. It fosters this idea of, that's what I'm being asked to do. You've been asked to do other things, so that's on you. So I want the team to leave with a group accountability. I want them to all agree that all these things are going to get done, and I have an accountability towards it all, right? I'm responsible for all of this, just like everybody else in the team is. Then encourage and allow time for cross-training and skill building. People will never be able to venture out if they feel like the organization is trying to keep them in a box, right? If the organization is saying, no, we hired you as a Java developer, why would you be doing testing? Then that's just going to break this. But if the organization encourages it and says, no, do you need some help in learning about testing? Maybe we can have a day where we have some testing training so that you can learn more about it. We believe as an organization that you are a better programmer if you know more about testing, right? Because the testing knowledge is going to help you when you program so that you know what the testers are looking for. That kind of thing, right? We want the organization to back it up, support it, right? The other one in this area is overlapping work. And this is a common problem we see quite a bit. We mean by this, team members often overlap work on the same item when one person beginning before someone else is finished. Don't see this, necessarily that often. This is something that, you really have to teach. And it's one of the more advanced kind of tools here. There's no discernible steps or phases in how the team works. They start the sprint and they end the sprint without going through we're in the design portion of the sprint, we're in the development portion, we're in the testing portion, right? There's not a handoff in the middle of the sprint, but there's constant back and forth of design, development, test, right? That kind of thing should be happening all the time. And then team members collaborate to finish items. When something is lagging and they need to get it across the finish line, team members support each other. They come together to try to push these things across the finish line. So what might you see here that would indicate this? Work is owned by individuals, not by the team as a whole. I know what I'm being asked to do, and those are my things. But I don't really know what anybody else is. By the way, here's a big clue. If you have a daily scrum, for example, and the people on the daily scrum are not paying attention to what anybody else is saying, they probably have a set of individual commitments, right? If I am working together with a group of people, then I need to understand and hear them. I need to have them tell me what they've done because I'm going to be helping them today. But if I have my 5 things that are being asked of me in this sprint, sure, I'll tell you what I worked on yesterday and what I plan to do today, but nobody else cares, right? That's when you have those daily scrums that everyone hates and nobody wants to be a part of because it's a waste of their time. The point of a daily scrum is to make a plan for the day. They're not making a plan for the day. They're just giving a status report, right? Iterations are divided into sequential phases. Like I said, do we have a phase in our sprint or our iteration where we do development? Do we have a phase for testing? If so, then we're kind of not really getting this, right? We're having a problem with this. We don't have overlapping work. Feedback is delayed and mistakes are found late in the iteration. If you're seeing a lot of bugs pop up right at the end, might be a clue, right? Might be a clue that you're really working in phases here. So what do we recommend? Work on smaller items. Get things to small. It's a discipline. It's something teams have to get good at. But we need to be able to break things down into smaller components, right? We need to be able to see things for the smallest level that they are. And when we can, then that allows multiple people to work on one item in the backlog at a time. Limit work in progress or work in process. Limit WIP, right? We often think about this as an individual. Oh yeah, I'm only working on one thing. How many things are the team working on? Or what's the WIP limit for the team? Does the team have a 5-item WIP limit and there are 5 different developers on the team? Then everyone's working on their own thing. If I have 5 developers, I'd probably put a WIP limit more at like 2. Right? As a team, we can only have 2 things in flight at a time. And everyone should be working on something within those first 2 to get it across the finish line. Somebody might scream, hey, well, we won't finish as much. Well, actually, studies show that you do. Studies show that you actually finish more if you do it this way, right? Limiting work in progress or work in process is a proven method of getting more done. Foster a team approach versus an individual contributor one, right? You want to help people to see things as, I'm a member of a team and the team goal comes first. Whatever I do to contribute to that is great, but it's not my focus. My focus isn't on my contribution alone. It's on what our team goal is, and that's what I'm committed to. So, for example, one thing that I do at the end of sprint planning is I ask for a gut check from the team. I ask them on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, how confident are you that we will actually accomplish the goals here, accomplish what we're committing to? And then I see their responses. We all reveal our responses at the same time. And if I'm seeing, lower end, if I'm seeing 2s, if I'm seeing 1s, we can't commit to this. Right? We've got to talk about it more. I want to see 4s, maybe a couple 5s. I want to see the upper end. If I see even a lot of people on 3, we're going to talk about it, right? I want the commitment to matter. The commitment has to matter. All right, last area, delivery. Big deal, right? Lots of people have problems with this. So this one element that's in this section, done every iteration, is a huge one. What we mean by this is the team takes iteration plans seriously, right? They're not just looking at things and saying, yeah, maybe we'll get done with that or maybe we won't, right? The organization places a higher value on finished work than it does on the number of work in process. We don't care about how many things are in flight. We care about what's actually done. That's what's important in our organization. The team rarely has unfinished items that must be carried over to the next sprint. Aha, there's the tricky one, right? Lots of teams have that problem. Lots of teams have things that carry over. When that happens, does it matter to the team? Do they care about it? Or do they kind of take that attitude of, we didn't finish it. We'll finish the next sprint, right? That's what we're talking about here. So let's talk about symptoms. What do we see when this happens? Teams are leaving a lot of work unfinished, right? Things just carry over. That's a symptom. Teams show little concern for that. I don't care. We'll finish the next sprint. If we don't, we'll finish it the sprint after that. Who cares, right? Teams try to look busy by having lots of items in process. This is an organizational symptom, right? If they feel the need to look busy, then they might start a bunch of things, but they're not going to finish a bunch of things because they have a lot of things in flight. So it's the organizational pressure on them to look busy that's the problem, right? Rather than helping teammates finish an item that's already in process, new work is started that is unlikely to be finished within the iteration. When someone finishes, right? If I finish everything I think I'm going to be doing for this sprint, do I automatically go first to the backlog to grab something new? Or is my first response, let me check in on my teammates and see how I can help them? That's what we want teams to do, right? We want that person, I finished everything I think I need to do in the sprint. How can I help the rest of the team? That should come first before we grab something new. And that's what we're saying here with that. So our recommendations for this section: encourage the team to commit to less. Less work is fine. I tell teams all the time, no one's pushing you to accept more work. Right? When you leave sprint planning, I want you to commit to what you are confident that you can accomplish. I don't want it to be a stretch goal, right? I want your commitment in sprint planning to be something that you're confident that you can accomplish, because what we're trying to do is build some confidence from the organization in us. We want them to feel confident that when we say something, that actually happens. Establish WIP limits, right? Establish team WIP limits so that they are constrained from picking up more stuff. Hey, we have a WIP limit of this. That's what's in process. I got to deal with it. How can I help the team finish what we have already in process? Then lastly, emphasize that only finished work can be shown during reviews. If you happen to be on a team that allows unfinished work to be shown, hey, we made a lot of progress on this, so we're at the sprint review. Why wouldn't we show it? We want to show some progress, so let's show this even though it's not done. If that's the case, this is one of the few things the Scrum Guide is actually specific about. Right? There's a lot of things that kind of depends on your situation. This one, the Scrum Guide says in the definition of done section, only things that match the definition of done are shown in a sprint review, right? So That's what we recommend. Stress that with them, help them understand we're only showing things that are really done. So let me connect the dots here from the elements to next steps. How do you take this stuff and then make a difference in your organization on it? And then we'll wrap this up and take some questions. Establish a transition community or team, right? Create that group that's in charge of the transformation, the transition, whatever word you prefer. Make it a cross-functional team, just like you have cross-functional teams that produce work. This team is in charge of the transition. They're not in charge of a particular product. They're in charge of the transformation the organization is going through. Have that team establish the transition backlog and make that very transparent, right? Don't make that a secretive backlog that only they can see, but just like anybody else's backlog, make it transparent. Allow other people to add things to it, right? You want that kind of groundswell from the bottom up. So don't limit teams from adding things to this team's transition backlog. They can decide what to do with it, but anyone should be able to have their voice heard and put on this backlog. And then take things like the recommendation slides we've been showing you and use those as a starting place for your recommendation backlog. Or if you do the survey and get your full report, there's a recommendation section for each element that maybe you had an issue with. Use those recommendations as potential items for your transition backlog. Right? Those can be starting places there. Encourage improvement communities. Right? I said this earlier. This main group, this enterprise transition community or transition team, whatever you want to call it, one of their goals is to foster these things to pop up in the organization. We got to have an army of volunteers. We got to have people in the organization who are on board with this. Each improvement community then focuses on things like automated testing or improving prioritization or being a better Scrum Master. Right? It doesn't have to be role-based, but it can be based on specific things, paired programming, right? It can be on something that a group of people organically form around. Don't have that enterprise team kind of say, hey, we need to have improvement communities on these 5 things. No, let the teams themselves identify it. Let them say, you know what, we would really be good, automated testing. Hey, let's get together with some like-minded people who all agree that that's what we need here. And let's meet regularly so we can see how we can promote it here in the organization. We want to have automated testing across all our teams. So let's meet together to make that happen, right? So encourage those. Form a strategic vision. This is what I talked about earlier. We need to understand why, because what you're doing is you're asking the organization to go through a change, and that's scary, right? It's scary to go through a change. Any change you go through is a little scary, right? Just remember the last time you moved in with a roommate, right? It's a little scary. I'm not sure that, that person does their dishes the same way I do mine. And that's different. That's new. So, it's a change. And if you don't have the why in front of that, hey, I have a new roommate because I don't have to pay as much for my rent. So I'm saving money. So that's my purpose, right? Or, I'm moving in with a loved one. I'm moving in with someone I care about. And the goal there is to have more time with this person. Then when those little things come up, then they're trivial, right? They're not as big of a deal because you have your eyes on the bigger prize. Same thing here. You're asking people to go through a transformation, a transition from the way things were to the way things should be. So help them to understand why. What do we hope to accomplish from this? Are we trying to get faster? Are we trying to, better serve our customers? What is that guiding reason behind why we're doing this? And then make that known so everyone's on the same page as to why. Show that organization why you're making a change, right? That's really, really important here. And then evangelize that vision across the organization. Don't keep it inside, don't hide it, but let everyone know, here's why you're being asked to change. Here's why you're being asked to go through training. Here's why you're being asked to do things in a way that you've never done them before. This is what we hope to accomplish, right? So that strategic vision can be really important. And then lastly, remove barriers, right? Remove the things that are preventing this thing from actually succeeding. Leadership can't make this happen alone. Culture change is hard. It's just tough. You can't just change the way people think overnight. You have to win people over. And when we do this, it takes time to do that. So as leaders in an organization, we want to remove any barriers that would make it even harder for this to take hold, right? Challenge the team to answer this question: what do we need to do to make this work here? In fact, in a lot of our private classes, we will have an exercise right at the end that says, why won't this work here? And we want those people in the class to identify, oh, well, here's our pain points, right? Here's why this is where this is going to cause friction, right? Our organization does things this way, and that's going to be a problem with this. Okay, let's identify them. We all know that they're there. So let's identify what those pain points are so that we can then empower people to actually remove them. Right? Give them the tools and the power needed to get rid of those things. Right? When there's something that's causing friction and it's going to be a problem for the transformation, show them that you're listening. Show them that you can help them get rid of things. Mike tells a story about some teams that he worked with that were at a big Silicon Valley kind of organization. And they came to him one day and were saying, wow, this new CEO we have, she's really making a difference. She's really changing things up around here. She's shaking things up. And so he said, all right, well, give me some examples because I'm curious. What kind of things is your new CEO doing? And they said, well, previously we had a different key card for all the different parking lots that we could park in. And you had to use the right key card for the right parking lot. She changed it, and now you can use one key card to get into any parking lot. And, Mike was sitting there thinking, wow, I expected to hear, wow, she really changed our process, or she got rid of this big impediment that we had, or whatever. It wasn't that, right? It was just part of the everyday life of the teams that she said, it's a problem for you. You've told me, I fixed it for you. And that can be so powerful to the teams to say, I listen to you, right? The leadership in this organization listens to you. This organization is about getting better. So when you identify problems, we're going to listen. We want you to be observant. We want you to report things so that we can fix them, right? We don't want to just be that organization that does the same thing wrong over and over and over again, and everyone feels hopeless coming here. We want to be the organization when we do something wrong, our primary kind of mode of operation is, well, that didn't work. What are we going to do about it? Right? And if that gets into the DNA of the culture, wow, that's so powerful, right? Any problems that come up, hey, we can move forward with this, right? We can do something about it. So I promised you this before. We have this address. You can get to this through our navigation on our main website as well. But if you go to mountaingoatsoftware.com/elements-of-agile, then you can take that survey, right? You'll have to give a little bit of information. We just like to take some demographic type information so we know something about the people taking it. But then you get the report, right? You get the report after you take the survey. It's a single kind of use, so you can't send everyone in your organization and have that combined. We can do that, but that's what we do in our private engagements. If that is something that you think, wow, our company could really use that, that's our email address. Go to hello@mountaingoatsoftware.com. Just email us and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more about that. Mike's wife, Laura, is going to be the person who responds to you. So Laura will get back in touch with you and say, great, let me give you some more information and we can chat about it. She'll get on a call with you, whatever. But we want to, the point is that we want to help you in whatever way works for you. So if that survey is really beneficial, and I think it really could be, take that survey, see what the results are, get your PDF, and use that as an action plan that you can use to start to improve your implementation. If you feel like you need more, hey, get in touch with us. That's what we do for a lot of organizations. So that's really all the content I had for you. So we're into Q&A. I'm happy to take any kind of questions you have. Free to ask anything about this or about transformations in general, or any kind of problems that you might have in the organization. I see Linda with her hand up, so I'll go to you first.
First of all, thanks a lot. It was really, really interesting. I have first an example that follows with a question. So I did the assessment for the team that I'm the Scrum Master for. And I have to say, I cannot believe you are giving away this tool for free because it was amazing. And the personalized report was like 74 pages, so it was quite extensive. And I really, really liked all the very hands-on activities that was also suggested for the improvement backlog. And also the additional resources part, because it is so much additional resources and way outside of also what the Mountain Goat software is producing by itself. So that was really useful as well. But what we found useful was the part about collaborative planning, because that's an area we have been struggling with a lot. And I think it's very common that among software developers that we are writing a lot, but we're communicating very little. So the issue there was the documentation and the Confluence. It was growing and growing and growing, and we couldn't really agree what is actually useful and not. And it was such a great activity there, where we grabbed like sticky notes and then we wrote down all of the different documentation that we provided for the last deliverable that we had. And then we divided them into, and it was like, meeting minutes and requirements, design decisions, and so on. And then we were ranking them in terms of like critical, useful, possibly useful, and unnecessary. And it just sparked so many great conversations. And also, I mean, the result was devastating in one way, because a lot of it was unnecessary. It's also a very great way of like how a very simple activity can lead to so many discussions. And also that we weren't basing the decision on some kind of gut feeling. We were basing it based on data. So that was a really, really great activity, I thought.
But think how, I know it may have been a little disheartening, but think how great that is, though, because if you hadn't done it, right, you would have continued to do all those things. But the fact that you stopped and looked at it and said, you know what, we don't really need these things. These things right here, they don't really provide us any value. Think of all the time you'll save moving forward from not doing those.
Yeah, exactly. No, I totally agree. It was just in the moment, it was just like, damn, what have we been doing with the time? But that activity was very useful. And now coming to my question, we are suffering from, I'm not sure if there's a term like death by meetings, but that's what we are suffering from. We're working in a large enterprise, Sweden's biggest company, and it is so many meetings. And it's a bit difficult to know like what and who should join what meetings, because we are like a spider in the web. We have interactions everywhere. So do you see any kind of activity where we could use some kind of like a similar, where we are looking at the meetings one by one? Is this really a critical meeting? Could we potentially also look at like the individuals, like for who is this critical? Should it always be the whole team that joins all of the meetings? Should we have some kind of ambassador? Or I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, a couple things. One very similar to the exercises you performed for the documentation, right? You can do sort of that grand kind of assessment of meetings to say, which meetings do we have on a regular basis that really provide us value, that we really all understand the need for, and which ones do we feel like this could have been handled over email, or this didn't really need to happen, right? That's one kind of approach. But another approach is to do it kind of retroactively. So go and maybe at the end of a week or the end of a sprint or something like that, make that a focus of maybe a retrospective or a special retrospective that's maybe cross-team even, to say, let's try to identify, let's just, everyone go back and look at your calendars, identify all the meetings that we had this week, document all those, let's see what all the meetings were, and we'll try to identify who was at each one of these meetings, and then let's talk through each one of these and say, was this worthwhile? Was there a purpose behind this meeting? If so, great, let's keep it. If not, let's put that as a candidate for something we should consider getting rid of. And for anyone that you put as a candidate to get rid of, say, how are we going to accomplish the purpose of that in a different way? What's the better way of accomplishing that? So you can either do it as just sort of a big exercise of let's take a look at every meeting ever, or you can take that kind of shortened time frame and say, let's look back over this last little period and try to see what we experienced and whether those things were actually helpful or not.
Well, it's a great input, and I think also our main issue is the external meetings that is happening outside of our teams. So it's meetings that we are not in charge of, or it's someone that thinks it's a meeting that we should attend for some reason. But I mean, still, if we have a valid reason, then most likely we can decline those meetings as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem, right? That this is what I would call an external constraint. you're inside of a system, and every system that you work inside of has constraints put on that system. And one of the constraints that you might be experiencing is you have people outside that can make demands on you to attend meetings and to show up for things, and you don't have a say, right? If I don't have a say in those meetings, then it's not a question of whether it's optional or not. If they won't listen to me, if I say I didn't need to be here or this was not really productive, then I can't really get rid of that meeting, right? I've got to just do the best job I can with the constraint that I have to attend these meetings. Now, what I would probably do even in that case is to say, hey, I know we have to have this meeting, but maybe we could improve on this meeting. Maybe we could have this meeting in a way that we could, why don't we try to identify before we come in, what's our goal? What are we trying to get out of this meeting before we walk into the room? And make sure everyone knows what that is so that we only take conversation in this meeting that really gets us to the goal of what we are trying to accomplish in the meeting, right? Even there, you can try to change really the tone of that meeting to be, less wandering and more concise about what it is you're trying to solve.
Really a great tip. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. I don't know, you guys can help me out this. I know there's questions that are in the chat, and there's, I don't know if we'd be better to take those verbally, or you want me to read some questions from the chat. You tell me what works best.
Yeah, I would like to ask Megan, I saw that you have some questions. Would you mind sharing by yourself?
Yes, I was, so I'm Megan. I'm a talent intelligence lead at Volvo Cars, and I'm new. I did a 2-day Pro Agile leadership training, but I'm new to the details of Scrum and so on. So I'm setting up a team and I want to do it right. But I'm curious about how it seems like with some Agile processes, if the team is not meeting, if it's in that symptom where it's not finishing event deliverables at the backlog, then the organization can say, oh, well, you're not delivering because you're not being agile enough. Is the answer to, I mean, how do you know when you're not being agile enough versus they're just you need more headcount or you need more people? And at what point do you just say, well, I mean, no, we're not going to stay up all night to do this because we need more headcount versus pushing through?
Right. So I have an analogy for you. It's sort of like if I am coaching a sprinter, right? Someone who runs for their athletic sport, and they try to run as fast as they can. And as the coach, I go up to him and say, oh, I see the problem. You're not running fast enough. Run faster. So next time, just make sure you run faster, right? That's kind of the approach that sometimes companies have with saying, oh, well, you're not being agile enough. You're not, you should be producing things faster. And that's a sign that you're more agile. So obviously you're not agile enough. The problem has to go back, right? Like, it's not, you can't just go to the team and say, be faster. You have to go to the team and say, all right, examine what's going on. Are there any gaps in the process? Are we doing things the most efficient way? Let's discuss it. Let's have a retrospective. Let's talk about this and say, here's the last sprint. What went wrong for us? And when they're able to really identify those things and say, oh yeah, in this sprint we had a dependency with this outside group, and that delayed us. Okay, now we have a target. Right now we can say, all right, how can we eliminate these dependencies? Can we bring that skill onto the team? Can we get that external person to deliver to us prior to the sprint so that when we're in the sprint, there's no delay, right? There's all sorts of little factors like that that could go into why the team is maybe taking longer. But the other thing is, it may be a perception, not reality, right? It could be that the team is actually doing fine and they're just learning, they're growing as they start to do this. So they may, if they can't identify anything, if they just look at it and say, I don't know, we just did the best job that we could, and this is how long it took. Well, in that case, then there's not really a target, right? At that point, I would say, all right, well, let's just be aware of this, right? Let's take a look at it because this is what we're hearing. And let's take a look at it at the end of the next sprint and see how it goes. Let's see if we get better. The team will improve, right? The team will get better, and their speed is going to increase just because they know each other, they work together, they learn how to work together, right? But otherwise, it's going to be small little tweaks of just things like, do we have too many things in flight? Are we working on too many things? Are we collaborating on things to get things done? It's going to be changes like that that are really going to affect the overall speed. But those are kind of things that they may not even recognize or know. That's something that as a Scrum Master, we have to kind of call out and say, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we run an experiment with this?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. We have Katarina. Would you mind sharing your question, Katarina?
Yeah, sure. What about when there is like a will of change from the CEO? Like I'm working in a very big company, but we have that layer of managers that they are very persistent not to change, and like the lower employees respond well. But then we have that issue when some information doesn't reach the upper management. So there is a wheel of change, but also we are being stopped by the middle layer.
Yeah. And this is not uncommon either, right? You get people who have been in the organization for a long time. They say, we do things this way here. So to me, the solution on this is partly that enterprise community, whatever you call it. When you have that team that's representative of the different departments, and the leadership, the upper leadership of the organization says, this team's empowered, right? We're empowering this team to make whatever changes are necessary for this to be successful. When that happens, then that management layer, that middle management layer, that group's above them, right? That group's above them then. And when they say, hey, we're doing things this way, they see that it's actually happening, right? They see that these things are actually changing. One of the things that kills the transformation sometimes is when people feel like this is a fad, this is going to pass. I know that we're eventually going back to the old way of doing things, so I'm going to just wait it out, right? I'm not really going to learn all this stuff. I'm not really going to change what I do, because I know that, a month from now, there'll be a new flavor and everyone will be all excited about that. But, we'll go back to the way we've done things. And the countermeasure to that is that they feel the accelerated progress, right? They see it as, look at this change. This change happened, and this change happened, and now this change is happening, and now this change is happening. So they feel that snowball rolling down the hill, and they kind of get to that point where they have to make a decision. Either I get off this mountain because the snowball's coming at me, or I'm going to be part of the snowball. And I hope that analogy makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
But yeah, if you can publicize the progress, if you can help them to see, hey, look at all these things that are going on, right? And that can be a weekly kind of announcement that gets sent out to say, here's all the changes that took place this week. If those kind of things can happen, then that layer of management starts to go, oh gosh, I better do something. I better get on board, or I better look for somewhere else to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very good input. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Right. We have another question, Brian, from Chikala. Sorry if I'm pronouncing not correctly here. Would you mind sharing your question? Chikala.
I can see it. It's a short one.
I can just read it. And can you please explain
it's a short one.
On the key metrics objectives for Agile? It will be helpful for everyone.
Yeah. So key metrics, as far as, if we're talking about an Agile transformation, right? How Agile are we? It's difficult to measure because it's about culture. So when it's hard to put a performance metric on culture to say, well, last month we were, this far on documentation, not being more important to us than interactions with people. And this month we're 2% higher, right? It's hard to know that. The best way that I've seen people do that is through sort of an ongoing survey process, so that they set a benchmark for how people feel the organization is, because this is a lot about how people feel in the organization. Do I feel like my voice is heard? Do I feel like we mean what we say when we say these agile values and principles are important to us? And then each individual one, do I feel like we can work at a sustainable pace? We're not being pushed to work beyond what we can actually accomplish, iteration after iteration. So you can take sort of a survey of that, see what the responses are, and then chart over time to see, have we improved on that? Do people feel like we're doing a better job of that, or worse? I know places like Spotify used to have a survey like that they would do. I think it was like a happiness thing that they would say, how happy are you about these things? And that was part of their key overall measures in the organization, was to say, hey, this is what our employees are saying. Our employees are saying this and that. And I remember some story about this where I think it was actually Spotify, and I forget, I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to tell this story wrong. You can look it up. I'm sure you can find this somewhere. But there was something about how they took the survey and the score was like over 4. It was somewhere between 4 and 5 out of a 5-point scale. And it seemed high. And it seemed like, when you read that score, you kind of think to yourself, oh, they were probably pretty happy with that. But the next sentence in the report that came out said, obviously, we're not happy with this. Right? The next line was, obviously, this is not good enough. We want for all of our employees to be happy. And if there are any of them that feel like that we're not doing all that we can, that's too many. So if you are one of the people who thought, this could be better, we want to hear from you. We've got anonymous systems in place for you to report to us. Tell us what we can do better. And those kind of things can be really powerful in the organization to say, here's where we were, here's where we are now, right? We previously, used to just do everything and hope that something was important. And now everyone feels like, no, everything we do is really valuable and there's value to it. Right? That kind of thing is probably the best way to judge that. There are other things that you can look at as far as like, our time to market, time to value, those kind of things. Maybe even doing sort of a chart to try to map out your waste in your process, and try to eliminate the waste there. But those are more tools, not really metrics. Anything else is sort of a secondary metric that will show you a lagging indicator, right? And lagging indicators aren't necessarily bad. You got to have leading and lagging. So that's the challenge, is how can I find some leading indicator that helps me think this change will actually make the change I hope? Then I'm going to measure it with a lagging indicator to see if it actually made that change the way I thought it would.
All right. Brian, we have one last question, Brian. Is that fine?
Go for it. Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah. We have one last question from Ravi. Would you mind sharing, Ravi?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
hi. So I have a generic question. First of all, thank you, Brian, for this very good insight. So I have this question that some organizations have this kind of hybrid agile, where we do some sprint ceremonies. We don't have a scrum master role, but we have it in the team, and then so I just want to know, like, if such kind of model exists, like where we can have this kind of in between, so I kind of get an impression that you can still work in a very in the old way or the conventional way, and you're doing like bit part of the agile. So do you see these kind of models, are these models successful?
Yeah, I think I understand. And I'm kind of two minds, Ravi. I think there's, on one hand, I always feel like if we could only implement one agile principle in our company, we'd be better off than if we had none, right? If we decide as a company we're going to work at a sustainable pace, but all the other stuff we can't do, then I think that we'll be a better company. We'll have happier employees. We'll produce a better product. I think it will make an impact. However, the other side of me also sees the danger in watering down things a little bit. So this is why, you know, in the slide I talked about, be clear about what's agile and what's not, right? If you have teams that are actually doing agile, make sure that those are called agile teams. If you have teams that are not really doing it, that they don't get that label, right? They're doing something else. It's not agile. So I think that you can have some benefits from putting in place just, you know, a handful of agile principles. But the danger is if that becomes seen as that's the way to do agile, right? If everyone else hasn't been exposed to this and they look at it and they say, oh, I know what agile is doing that one thing. Then the problem is that becomes a hindrance in the future to you being able to adopt the whole thing, right? So that I guess I would say take the benefit you can from whatever principles that you can actually enact, and from the ones that you can't yet, make sure that as the organization shifts, because hopefully even that little bit will help the organization start to shift towards agile. As it starts to shift, make sure people know, well, here's the things that we are doing that aren't agile, right? These things are very agile. These things are not agile. And if people recognize that, then it's not so much of a danger.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Shrivi has her hand up too. Do you mind if I take that?
Yes, please.
Go for it.
Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for such a lovely session. Sure. When we are actually trying to understand when we are going for a new project and they are just transforming from a waterfall to agile methodology, the mindset is not changing, that they are actually trying to incorporate what is there in the waterfall method to agile. They are carrying it forward to agile as well. So in that case, I see a lot of siloed teams, like sometimes, you know, developers developing in one side and the testers doing it in a siloed manner, and they are trying to merge it. It's like really difficult for the Scrum Master to handle it. So how do we, you know, approach this kind of a system?
Yeah, silos can be real problems, right? I mean, that's a fundamental thing when you start thinking about agile, because it says it's always going to promote communication. And if people are working in silos, they're not communicating. So I think, like, you know, this is an issue like a lot of other things, that light has to be shined on the issue, right? Because a lot of times in organizations, when things like this happen, they go by in darkness. Nobody really sees that that's an issue, and there's no visibility into the fact that it's an issue. But if we're able as agile change agents in the organization to say, hey, wait a minute, look at this, right? See this over here? This doesn't seem right. Does that sound right to everybody? It doesn't sound like this really fits into what we say we're trying to do. Help me understand how these two things can exist at the same time. And by doing that, you can get people to start to think, oh, you're kind of right. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it doesn't really match up, right? Those things don't really go together. So now you recognize the issue, right? Now you've spread kind of the knowledge that, hey, this is not right. So again, if you start to work this into the DNA of the culture, when we find things that aren't right, we try things to do it differently. So the next question is always, all right, if that's not the way we want it, what should we do that would be a different way of handling that?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So it seems that we're getting close to our last question. It was just done now. Brian, thank you very much. I appreciate the time and the willingness that your dedication for helping others to succeed with Agile. And I'm sure that this was a really valuable presentation for everyone here. Appreciate it. Reminding everyone that this recording and the slides will be up there in a few weeks, in 1 or 2 weeks. And if you want to connect with Brian on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so, so we can just continue this conversation even further. Yes, Brian, appreciate, man. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, just one quick thing, Marco.
Yeah.
If you do, I'm happy to hook up with people on LinkedIn. My one request is if you send me that request, just put a little memo in it that says, "Hey, I was in the talk tonight," and then I'm sure, like a lot of you, I get all those requests from people that want me to start a new business, selling some silly thing, and I try to ignore those. But if you put that in the memo, "Hey, I was in your talk this evening," then I'll be glad to connect with you and hook up and stay in contact with you.
Amazing. I'm sure that we are going to be doing that. Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone, for participating here, for being with us tonight. I appreciate it. Have a good evening. And yeah, we'll see you around. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was
Thank
really
you
valuable.
very much.
Thanks.
Goodbye.